Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
I think my body clock is restored.
Yes.
After the post-election all-nighter. Took a little bit. But I don't feel like the news cycle has slowed down at all.
They're not doing you any favors. By the way, someone said, remember that picture where Mnuchin and his wife were holding up all that money?
Yeah.
And she's wearing like white gloves, and it's so like, I don't know, iconic. Yeah, just horrible optics.
Right.
Someone said today that was 1 year ago. I feel like it was a decade ago.
I mean, it is just it's a relentless news cycle. I mean, and you know, I don't know if you read the.
By the way, when were the midterm elections? How many weeks ago?
It was 1 week ago.
Okay.
I don't know if you're the Daily Caller transcript of the Trump interview that they did, but he goes on and on about how poorly and how well the media is doing. I mean, there's this one paragraph on CNN where they're doing terrible and they're doing amazing all at the same time. They're doing terrible because they hate Trump, and they're doing amazing because they talk about Trump all the time. And he thinks that they're going to miss Trump. They're going to miss these great ratings. The New York Times, they're doing amazing because of Trump, and they're going to be so sad when I'm gone.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think the media will function whether or not Trump is there. They don't need Trump, but it is the case that he does everything possible to make news. He hates taking a break.
Yeah.
I mean, when you watch the press conference, the day after press conference from the election, for about 15 minutes, there is this modicum of humility, and I think on a certain level, an actual interest in let's pass some legislation. You know, Nancy Pelosi, she deserves to be speaker, and you know, we can do business, and let's get some infrastructure done. Let's get some immigration reform done. I think there is like, you know, 5% of his brain that actually wants to be art of the deal again, and he just can't go for a full half hour without doing something insane, because he knows
it really is amazing how. No, I know all the caveats, including the inherited wealth from Fred, but it is amazing that a person could be successful and live 71 years and be this, you know, capricious and have such a small attention span, and like the inability to stick to any sort of plan for more than a half hour. It's amazing that you could like survive and thrive, but again, the caveats.
I mean, I think that just speaks to like all of society has excused and rationalized his behavior from the get-go, and treated like, you know, a fun little joke, and without recognizing what it was all going to lead to. And it's a sort of a quintessential example of, you know, the Lord, give me the confidence of a mediocre white male. You know, as long as you exude that kind of confidence, regardless of what facts and reality have to offer, you just blow through that.
There's a 30 Rock episode where who's the guy from Good Will Hunting, the actor?
Matt Damon or Ben Affleck?
Matt Damon is playing Liz Lemon's boyfriend, and he's like an airplane pilot.
Right.
And there's a scene where like he just shows up at 30 Rock, and Tina Fey is like, "How did you get in here?" And he's like, "I found that if you wear a pilot's uniform and you just walk, you know, with confidence, people let you go wherever you want." There's something, you know, there is something about exuding a confidence that you're supposed to be there, you know where you're going, that people will basically let you do what you want. I mean, as Donald Trump's famous Access Hollywood line suggests, when you're a celebrity, it's adios reality.
Right. So let me segue from that to the battle over the speakership, because I think that dynamic, while it has served Trump well, I think it remains to be seen what's going to serve Seth Moulton well. Now, I wrote a piece
for Seth and I go way back. Who's Seth Moulton?
Oh, so
for those listening who may not be aware,
Seth Moulton is, I think he's 38. congressman from Northeast Massachusetts, the 6th district, so it's up in the, I think it touches the New Hampshire border. I could be mistaken with it, but it's north of Boston. Military veteran, has got a lot of press as sort of, young, up-and-coming Democrat, military veteran. Many think he wants to run for president. He founded a PAC this year called the Serve America PAC, which initially backed military veterans, though it expanded to other people that he said exuded service, national service. And he was a leading Pelosi critic 2 years ago, although he didn't run himself. He backed Tim Ryan, Congressman Tim Ryan, who also might run for president, or maybe run for speaker again, but I think more likely run for president. And in 2016, there was a sense that Democrats just got their butts kicked, and so there was an argument to have some broader leadership change to put a fresh face to the American public. Pelosi beat that challenge back, although Tim Ryan got about 60 votes, so I think about a third of the caucus. And then when John Ossoff lost that special election in Georgia 6 in the middle of 2017, there was this fresh round of complaints. And there's one congressman named, forgive me, I'm pronouncing his name right, I think it's Philemon Vela, who was quoted in Politico saying, you have to be an idiot to think we can take the House with Pelosi at the top. Now, here we are, after the midterm elections. The Democrats did take the House with Pelosi at the top. Now, there were many Democrats who ran saying, in some way, that they opposed Pelosi being speaker. There were a couple, specifically Joe Cunningham and Abigail Spanberger, said, I will not vote for Pelosi on the floor of the House. I will not vote for Pelosi under any circumstances. They're the only two that made that pledge in the campaign. Others said more broadly, I don't support Pelosi for speaker. And there are others that said, even more vaguely, I think we need a new generation of leadership. So if you count all those folks, regardless of the specifics of their pledge, that gets you to 48 people that ran on such a platform. But about 32 of them lost. So we got a few races that are on call, but you're talking about 14 to 16 who won on some kind of opposition to Pelosi. You have at least 25 that didn't do that and won. So now you have, so Seth Moulton, he's not running for speaker himself, but he's been a public face of it. He was on CNN last night talking about, they're trying to nudge Congresswoman Marcia Fudge into the race, who's an African-American woman from Ohio. And she said she's thinking about it, but she hasn't actually made the...
Why her? What is it about Martha Fudge that would make her the potential rival?
She's not a white male like Seth Moulton. So the most prominent people who are pushing this are white males. Seth Moulton, Tim Ryan, Earl Perlmutter from Oregon. There are a couple others who've been the ringleaders. And the hashtag 5whiteguys has become quickly popular. 5 white guys for House Pelosi. So they're desperate to...
I thought that was a new burger place popping up or something.
They're desperate to have a face of the movement that's not a white guy. Because, just to get back to the initial conversation...
alt-right has finally taken over the cheeseburger business.
It is horrible optics to say the woman who was the first woman speaker, who broke a glass ceiling, who was considered a successful speaker when she was speaker, who has taken years of attacks. I mean, she was the target of the midterm election from the Republicans. To weather that, to be the major fundraiser for the Democrats, to help craft the message that most Democrats won on, and have most Democrats who won not be in opposition to her, to then say, you've done all that, you've brought us to the promised land, and now we're going to show you the door, and to have a 38-year-old white guy who doesn't have remotely level of experience that she does be the ringleader of that, that's just a pretty bad dynamic for the party writ large.
What about age, though? What the 30-year-old white guy could argue, this is a generational shift. She's part of the establishment. She's, I don't know how old. It's time for a new generation of leaders, people who are younger, who can appeal to younger progressives and millennials. Isn't that a legit argument?
Well, I think it is theoretically a legit argument, but it needs more. It's not a legit argument by itself. And I think this is where Moulton is getting. Now, let me just say, I can't predict who's going to win this battle, because you have the Moulton forces saying we have at least 17 people who are pledging now to not vote for Pelosi on the floor. And so this is a two-step process. The Democrats meet in a caucus towards the end of this month to vote for their leaders. So you vote for majority whip, you vote for majority leader, you vote for chair of the caucus, and you vote for your speaker nominee. And then, so for all the other party positions, that's it. It's the party caucus votes is it. Speaker goes to the full House. Both parties vote, and you need an absolute majority of those voting to be speaker. So in theory, depending on what the final margin is, once all the races are called, and depending on who shows up to the vote and who abstains for the vote, there'll be a certain fixed number that you need to get an absolute majority. So possibly Moulton, at least he's saying, I have 16, 17 folks. I think one of the 17 is Ben McAdams, who may end up losing in Utah 4. But if these people commit and say, we are going to vote no on Pelosi on the floor, they can say, look, she can't win, so she better get out of the race now, or it's going to be, total chaos on the House floor. So
I guess you could have a position where Republicans just for fun could all vote for him, right, or something. I don't know. I don't know why they would want to. Maybe they.
Congressman Tom Reed, who is a Republican and part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is this No Labels project, and they have a package of House rules reforms which they believe would facilitate bipartisan legislation. They are saying, this is separate from Moulton, they're saying, we'll vote no for any speaker who doesn't embrace these reforms. And Reed has said, we're talking to my fellow problem solver Republicans to give Pelosi votes.
Right.
If she loses some other Democrats, if she embraces this rules package.
Now, I think, didn't you say on Twitter yesterday that there was some, Boehner had a potential where Democrats were going to help Boehner a few years ago?
This wasn't public at the time. But when there was rumblings that the Freedom Caucus was going to move to vacate the chair, oust Boehner in the middle of his speakership, which you can do with a faction of votes with Democratic help. So if a faction of Republicans joins Democrats, they can have a majority vote saying the speaker's chair is vacated, and you force a new vote. Pelosi apparently privately told Boehner, and she said this to Politico's Tim Alberta, after Boehner left the speakership. I told him, we will get you the votes to keep you in speaker, because we can't have 30 Congress people vacate a chair. That's not tenable for the institution. She said, right. I have the institutions back, not Boehner's back. That's what she said. So it's just an example that, Pelosi is not someone who's been, partisan all the time. She's very much institutionalist. She has enacted compromise legislation before, but I'm getting a bit far removed from where we were going with the conversation. So I think it is possible that Moulton could keep this small faction of Democrats to deny her the speakership. I can't say that's not a possibility. As far as how well he is making the argument to the broader pool of Democrats, I think he is doing a poor job, because his argument is strictly, we need a new generation of leadership. But it begs the next question, why exactly? So what is it about the current leadership that's bad? The argument 6 months ago was Pelosi's dead weight. Pelosi is a magnet for these attacks maybe it's unfair, but she is hurting our ability to take over the House. That is demonstrably proven wrong. Yes, there are some Democrats that distance from her, but more Democrats who flipped districts did not distance themselves from her. And in fact, there are enough of them to have claimed a House majority by themselves. Not by a lot, but enough. You certainly can't argue that they needed to get rid of Pelosi to win the speaker, to win the House majority. So now it becomes just about a change in generational leadership, and it ignores, wait a second, you have somebody at the top who, one, has been an effective speaker, and not just from a crudely ideological or partisan standpoint. She crafted the compromise in 2007 to raise the federal minimum wage by tying it to Iraq war funding, which Democrats did not want to support. People like to say she got Obamacare passed. They often don't say how she got Obamacare passed. She got Obamacare passed not because she wanted public option in the bill, but after she got in the first version of the bill, went back to her caucus and said, okay, you got to suck it up and lose public option because it can't pass the Senate. Just last year, when there were threats of a shutdown, and a brief shutdown over the DACA issue, she publicly said, we're not going to support this bill if you don't have protection for Dreamers. And then she quietly told the more vulnerable Democrats, you can go do what you want. I'm not going to whip you on this vote. So they didn't have a protracted shutdown over that issue. And so you talk about Washington dysfunction. That's not Pelosi. Pelosi is not someone who makes the Congress not work. And she's not someone who makes democratic principles not advance. So when you ask Moulton, and he was asked in a Politico podcast several months ago, back in June, he was asked, why don't you run for speaker? You're talking about leadership and new generation. Why don't you do it? And he says, that's not for me. To be an effective speaker, you need to understand all the inside baseball and transactional politics, doing favors. You know who's good at that? Nancy Pelosi. He literally says this.
Hey, I'm sorry. Are we still? I want to make sure we're still taping. I saw your screen blinked for a second.
I had a phone call came in.
Oh, okay, cool. But I just want to make sure we're still taping because this is gold, Bill.
Yeah, no, I think we're fine. All right. So even the Moulton forces don't argue that Pelosi is bad at her job. They only argue it's time for a new generation. But why? Why do you? If she's getting bad at her job, then you say you're hanging on to power too long. But we're in a situation where Democrats have a very diverse caucus now. You got socialists, you got Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib, and you got people who won in R+10 districts. Kendra Horton, Oklahoma 5, Drew Cunningham, South Carolina 1. You got a handful of military veterans who are national security focused. You have wealthy business owners. It's not going to be that simple to keep those folks unified and to make the calls when you say to folks, you know what, okay, you can go your own way on this one. I don't need you on this one. I don't think you put an amateur in that spot. And look, maybe it's not a great idea that the troika of Democrats, Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, Jim Clyburn, they're all over 70. They've all been there a long time. They haven't done a great job grooming the next generation. I think it's a fair criticism that we're not poised for a smooth transition on the Democratic side. But I don't think that the solution to that is just to blow it all up and put a rank amateur into a very tricky position going up against Trump and the Republicans, trying to maintain Democrats in red districts. You have a presidential primary going on. If Republicans are smart, and maybe they're not, they would find ways to drive wedges through Democrats and put things on the floor that would be very enticing for red district Democrats to want to do. I think you want a pro in there to navigate those kind of dynamics and maybe have someone new. I mean, I wrote in my piece, challenge Hoyer. Now, at this point, Hoyer has said he has the votes, so that's going to happen. There is a challenge to Jim Clyburn. I think it's a bit dicier. He's the only African-American in the leadership. I think probably better to take out the white guy if you're going to take out one of the three. But do something to get someone ready to succeed Pelosi in 2 to 4 years. And Pelosi's 78. She's not going to live to 120. Be a little patient, young Democrats. She will retire. It doesn't have to be today. Learn the ropes first, for Pete's sake.
I find myself in agreement with you, Bill. As much as I like to beat up on Nancy Pelosi and her San Francisco values, if I'm a Democrat, if I'm you, I would say the same exact thing. I think you're exactly right, and I do think, just to reiterate what you just said, they need to find a way to deal with the problem that there is no succession plan. There is no plan to bring in a younger person in the leadership in any sort of smooth transition way. But I think you nailed it. You said it all. Good show.
Just to gild the lily. I said in my piece that if you do go after Pelosi, you risk a lot of backlash because she is an historic figure. She is a woman, and to sort of take her out after she has successfully weathered these attacks, that might offend Democrats both in the progressive camps and in the pragmatic camps, because Pelosi has feet in both camps. She has this caricature for the Republicans as the embodiment of San Francisco values, but she's really more of a Baltimore machine pole. She's than an ideologue. But there's some people that obviously have affinity for her because she is seen as a liberal too. And I think Moulton is starting to suffer that now. I only have what I can see on social media. And social media is not, the window into a cross-section of America. But I will say this. I got a lot of response yesterday. And many of my tweets don't get responses. I'm not someone with a million.
I don't believe that for a second.
I'm not someone with a million followers that react to everything. And most of the reaction I get on Twitter is socialists telling me that I'm a corporatist tool. There was a lot of reaction yesterday because I tweeted some stuff about Moulton after he was on CNN. And I had people saying, who do I donate to primary Seth Moulton? Who do I fund to primary all of these 5 white guys? And Moulton's someone who I think Moulton probably isn't running for re-election, quite frankly. I think he's running for president. I don't think he wants to be in the Congress forever. Because he speaks very, dismissively about what it takes to be a congressperson. And maybe being the young guy who took it to the Democratic establishment, even in defeat, maybe that gets him some fans. And in a primary field, to me, this sprawling, playing the niches might have its benefits. But he is generating enemies doing this. He will be a controversial figure in a Democratic primary because he has done this, and because his argument, quite frankly, is so weak. He doesn't have a strong reason to get rid of her, and that's being exposed now by people who weren't necessarily huge fans of Pelosi before because she proved herself in this election. She raised $135 million for this cycle. Seth Moulton's PAC raised $2 million. So why do you get to have the whip hand and say, I'm going to decide who the speaker is?
I think there are two things. One, should we get rid of people because they're old, or should we value experience and success? Right? There is ageism, and especially in a world that values and fetishizes youth as we do, being old is a bad thing. That's one argument. That's a type of identity politics. I'm actually with you that we should not throw out wise, experienced old people because they're old. The second thing is Nancy Pelosi polarizing? Does she hurt? Yes, she does. Why? Guess what? When you are successful and when you are the leader, you become demonized and villainized. And I think that some people are maybe more susceptible to this than others. But, you got to take the good with the bad.
Well, and I think and there's always a misnomer for all these types of positions. I think this was true in the DNC chair race, and it's true when it comes to congressional leadership positions. People talk about it as if the most important criteria is who is the best face of the party.
Right.
So we had this in 2017 for DNC chair. Who's going to be the best face of the party? Is Tom Perez the face of the party? No. Tom Perez runs a party machine, and deals with fundraising and grassroots organizing. I mean, he's on TV from time to time, but no one's gonna say, I'm gonna vote for against Democrat because of Tom Perez.
Yeah.
And if you could argue a few months ago that as the leading congressional Democrat, you are the face of the congressional Democrats and therefore the face of the midterm election, and making her that as the target didn't work. So to the extent that she was a risk, it was a week ago. You weathered that risk.
The argument that the sort of strawman argument you're presenting was kind of the case for Michael Steele against Barack Obama.
Right. And was he, and Michael Steele, I have a certain amount of respect for him. He's a bit of a straight talker. He's not party apparatchik these days. Was he a good manager of the RNC?
Well, he actually did get results in defense of Michael Steele. It was a very chaotic time but he actually did, if the proof's in the pudding, so to speak, he did get results. I don't want to belabor the point too much, except to say that I've come to really agree with your point, which is the only thing that matters in terms of the image is the standard bearer. A Speaker of the House, a Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. Say what you will about Mitch McConnell, the guy, does look like a turtle. He is like a good majority leader if you're a Republican. He gets stuff done. We don't need him to be George Clooney.
Well, here's the thing. If your job is to lead a body of Congress, you will be unpopular. Your job is to do all the Washington bullshit that everybody hates.
I don't know if that was always the case historically, but it is today.
You name me a relatively recent speaker, majority leader, minority leader who was popular.
Yeah. I definitely think it's true today. But by the way, a little bit of an aside, but I'm reading the Kornacki book right now.
Yeah.
Because he's coming on the podcast, and I'm still in I'm like chapter 3. Mm-hmm. And the part where Newt Gingrich goes head to head against Tip O'Neill is I knew a little bit about that,
right?
But it's really compelling that read.
O'Neill or Jim Wright?
No, it's Tip O'Neill is still the Speaker of the House, and Newt Gingrich is a backbench Georgia Republican, and Newt is doing this thing where he goes on C-SPAN and gives Democrats hell, and Tip O'Neill. I'm like 90. I'm just reading it right now, so I'm pretty sure it's Tip is still Speaker. Maybe in fairness, I drink a lot before I read. Orders them to turn the cameras around and show that there's nobody actually sitting there, and then Tip and Newt get into this basically argument, and I believe. I have to go check that Tip actually, the parliamentarian actually has some of his words withdrawn, which is the first time it ever happened to a speaker. Yeah.
So, you look at the polls right now, Pelosi's polling, I think the most recent poll, she had 28% favorable. I think it's Harvard-Harris. But Paul Ryan's was 31, marginally better, and Schumer and McConnell's were worse than 28. They were in the mid-20s. So you're going to be popular in that job. And if you're worried about her being the face of the party, well, in 2020, the face of the party is going to be the presidential nominee. So you need someone who can do the job of speaker. Being the face of the party is not what that position is. And so youth for youth's sake doesn't get you where you need to go as far as having a good manager of that position.
I think that people who play identity politics get lazy because, and it's probably especially true amongst liberals, because if we're having an argument and I can basically be like, well, yeah, but you're a racist, then the conversation stops. That's a really cheap and easy way to win a debate. And because if I can be like, yeah, but you're, so in a way, I think that Jonah Goldberg says like the worst form of identity politics is youth identity politics because it doesn't last. Like if you train yourself to win arguments based on, okay, old man, but you're not hip like me,
right.
Like eventually it's not going to work for you anymore because you're going to get old.
Right.
We all get old. And so I think that maybe there's a little bit of this here where like these guys are used to winning arguments based on, yeah, but you're old, get with the program. You know what I mean? And it's not working in this case. And they're not used to having to actually do the intellectual legwork of developing like a coherent argument as to why being young actually matters or why the generational shift really matters. And so maybe there's a little laziness here that's coming through. Let
me bring us back to Republicans for a sec. So as I said earlier, Tom Reed told The Hill that it's possible he would scrounge up a few Republican votes for her if she embraces the problem solver rules package. Right after the midterms, Donald Trump tweeted, Pelosi deserves a speakership, and maybe we'll get her a few votes if Democrats give her a hard time. If that actually happened, if Republicans gave her a few votes and got her over the finish line, what happens in the Republican Party and the conservative movement? They've been demonizing her for so long that if they actually surrender to her in this respect, what's the fallout there?
None. No fallout. Now, you and I both know if John Boehner or Paul Ryan or George Bush or Mitt Romney had come up with this idea and done it, they'd be run out of town on a rail. Rush Limbaugh would be tarring and feathering them. But if it happened now, and if Trump, sort of like I like Nancy. Nancy's a good person,
But Trump is key there. Trump has to give the cover.
He at least has to go along with it. Yeah. But as long as Trump does it, it's perfectly fine. And in fact, not only is it okay, it's the conservative thing to do.
Yeah, I tweeted out. It was a small nugget.
That's the Wilford Brimley Plan B, and it's the conservative thing to do.
I don't toot my horn a lot, Matt, but it was this nugget in the Hill article on I think it was on Monday or Tuesday, and it was like way down the article. It was the 20th paragraph, and when I saw it, and I was like a day late reading this article. I was like, how is this not the headline of this article? And I don't get as much credit as the person who reported the story and for Tom Reed for actually making the quote. But I tweeted out yesterday, and everyone was like, what? And some people responded.
And what was the story that you tweeted?
I mean, the headline of the story was sort of Pelosi in trouble.
Okay.
But way down the story was this quote from Tom Reed saying Republicans might give her some votes.
Oh, so you're saying like this was kind of buried, This
is like the most buried lead I've ever seen. And
no, you know what the most buried lead was? The most buried lead was the bondage-themed nightclub going all the way back to the Michael Steele era, which was totally buried and not the headline.
But I saw some Democrats in my feed saying, "Oh, Republicans want to keep Pelosi in there. They know she's easy pickings.
Yeah,
we're getting played." So yeah, I would imagine there'll be some teeth grinding on both sides to some extent. Like, why is the establishment coming together to save Pelosi and not have the new leadership that the public demands?
I think that it would be that okay, this will sound hypocritical of me. So the old, Ted Cruz, I'm more conservative than you, and I'm going to show it. The old Ted Cruz model would have been, we got to stand against Nancy Pelosi. I actually think Republicans should play some sort of psychological warfare. What do you have to lose? You've already lost the House. Why not, exacerbate the divisions in the Democratic Party and support,
well,
Nancy.
I think
what do you have to lose?
I think you exacerbate the division of the Democratic Party without Pelosi. Pelosi helps Democrats, I mean, there'll be divisions no matter what, but I think she is a force for unity much more than a force of division within the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
So
I guess that's a good point. I mean, my point is, if you assume she's going to end up being the speaker anyway, but maybe I guess it's within the realm of possibility that she won't be the speaker, and then you would end up with some rank amateur that you could outmaneuver.
You keep Pelosi in there if you actually want to pass something. There's more of a chance you'll actually pass some kind of legislation. Even just keeping the government open. She's not a burn the house down politician.
So you're saying we want her on that wall. We need her on that wall.
If your strategy is, I really want to get an infrastructure bill passed.
What if my strategy is just not blowing up America? What if I just want to keep the country going? Who do I want?
I think you want someone who is institutionalist more than someone who doesn't know what they're doing.
So then I want Nancy.
I think in that case, yes. Now, let me pivot to a different subject. Let me move to 2020. I'm
not sure we've belabored the point about Nancy Pelosi quite enough. But if you want to move on, we can prematurely.
I think there's a certain parallel here in that I feel like Moulton is making the same argument against Pelosi now than he did before, regardless of the new evidence that's been presented for themselves. Now we're starting to see people make arguments for what we need to do in 2020. I think removed from what just happened. So you have, do you know Richard Ojeda?
Of course I know, but let's go. I think for the sake of the audience,
Richard Ojeda. I believe was the only Democrat who voted for Trump who was nominated for Congress in this cycle. So he ran in West Virginia 3, one of the Trumpiest districts in the country. And he's not devoid of Trump criticism, but he could at least say, I'm not reflexively anti-Trump because I voted for him. And he was sort of a quintessential testosteronal, angry, anti-Pelosi Democrat, white working class populist. He encouraged the West Virginia teacher strikes that were very effectual, and he ran a competitive race considering how Republican a district it was, but he still lost, and not all that close. He announces his run for president a few days ago, and does an interview where he's complaining how the true Democratic Party is not the party of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Maxine Waters. And it's like, buddy, you lost. You're going to say what the party stands for more than the people who won? And you also have this huge boomlet for Beto O'Rourke running for president, which in some respects is a bit more legitimate. He ran a closer race.
Yeah.
He has
Here's where you and I are going to disagree, Bill.
Well, that's fine.
For the first time, we've been talking for 45 minutes. I feel like, isn't that like in Alice's restaurant? Doesn't he say something like that? I've been talking for 45 minutes, and now we finally disagree. I'm not going to stand here and let you disparage him.
I know your life's ambition is to have a beer with Beto O'Rourke. But
maybe things will go farther. I don't know. We'll start off with the beer, but maybe he'll pick me up at an airport someday.
I mean,
if things advance to that level, maybe help me move. You never know.
I mean, some of the love for Beto is Beto. That they think he is a good candidate, charismatic candidate, built a huge army of volunteers, has a huge donor network, and is just the right kind of persona that Democrats need in 2020. And I for one, think
we need an Hispanic president.
Okay, his last name is O'Rourke. Let's not forget that. But I think there's also a belief in some of the Democratic Party that the way to win is you swerve left, you galvanize your base, you gin up the youth vote, you gin up the people of color vote, and you overwhelm the Republican Party. And to some extent, Obama did that. I think he was careful how far to the left that he went, but he definitely didn't run as a centrist. And so it's not like that model can't work. It has worked. But you also had 3 candidates try that in this election. Beto in Texas, Stacey Abrams in Georgia, and Andrew Gillum in Florida. And I understand that Georgia and Florida are not officially called yet, but by all appearances, they're all going to have run decent campaigns in tough places, but still fell short. And if you want to argue, well, they did well, if you want to grade them on a curve and say, well, they did pretty well considering where they were running, this doesn't disprove the model. Okay, it doesn't totally disprove it, but I also have all these other data points. I have all the Democrats that did flip districts. I have all the Democrats that did win Senate seats and took Republican Senate seats, most notably Sinema in Arizona, who took a Trump state. And I have the 7 governorships. I have all these other examples when, by and large, they didn't run to the left. They ran as bipartisan, independent problem solvers. They avoided the cultural issues. They stuck to bread and butter. They didn't do single payer. And they did pick off swing voters. So I'm not going to argue that that's the end of the argument either. But if I'm using the midterms as at least part of what's going to guide me, I'm going to look at the folks that won, of which there are a lot, and not the few people that lost, but lost admirably. I mean, at minimum, if you're going to make the Beto case, at least grapple with all of the counterfactuals, again, of which there are dozens. So I just find the whole thing kind of weird. And to some extent, I think there's a gender element here. Let's love up the white guy who gave it his best shot and ignore all the women and the people of color that ran different races and won.
Where to begin? I could write a dissertation on this. I wanted to write.
You're a frustrated academic at heart, Matt.
I know, man. I've got a lot to say about this, but I'm not sure if it's going to be hard to kind of weave it all together. It's it's not necessarily coherent or consistent. So first, I think you would agree with me that there's a stark contrast between, as we discussed, like what works as Speaker of the House and what you want in a standard bearer, right? I do think that as a party standard bearer, as president, like image and charisma are vitally important, and those things are not the top priorities for who you want as a speaker. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So the lessons I think are very different. For me, if I'm a Democrat and I'm thinking like, who do we want as our nominee? There are a couple of different ways of thinking about it. But one of the things that you do is you look obviously at Donald Trump. One of the things we don't know what the political universe is going to look like exactly. We don't know what the world is going to exactly look like in 2020, but we can assume Donald Trump is going to be the Republican nominee. That's one variable we kind of know. So as such, what kind of person would match up well against Donald Trump, right? Another thing that I think we know is that America likes rock star presidents. From Ronald Reagan, a movie actor, a star, to Donald Trump, a reality star. We have 30 years of presidents who are, with one exception being George H.W. Bush, who basically got Reagan's third term. We have almost 30 years of people who are, Barack Obama, he's the biggest celebrity in the world, Bill Clinton had this larger than life charisma. Even George W. Bush had that swagger. These are all people who filled up the room, who had a certain charisma on screen. The more charismatic, the more likely they were to win. Bob Dole is a better man than Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's the star. George W. Bush, more star power than Al Gore. Now, I guess you could argue there Al Gore actually did win the popular vote, but stick with me here. He didn't become president. That's the premise, at least. So based on that, who is the type of person? Here's the other point I would make is I think that perception is more important than ideology. Okay? So like Sinema, for example, in Arizona, we know that 10 years ago she was an ultra radical left winger. She came across as this moderate, likable, kind of attractive, likable, moderate person. Like, that's more important than her actual. And I know she also ran to the center, policy-wise too. But I think the perception is what matters. Beto seems like a nice, moderate guy. I think that overcomes like whether he's for single payer or whatever, right? So perception matters. So you end up with this presidential race where you have Donald Trump as the Republican. How do you beat Donald Trump? Well, you could become his opposite, right? But what does that mean? Well, you could be boring. I don't think that works. I don't think Amy Klobuchar, I don't think there's any clamoring for let's go with a boring Midwesterner.
There's some clamor for that.
That's your theory.
They're not making that exact argument. But I do.
Let me just finish real quick. I think the argument for Beto is that the way you don't out nasty Trump like Michael Avenatti, and you don't contrast him by he's exciting, I'm boring. It's the I think here is where you make the generational move. Beto is younger, he is cooler. I think he can excite liberals. I think he can turn out the liberal Obama coalition. I think he's got the excitement and energy that Obama had. But I also think, like Obama, he can appeal Beto O'Rourke through the sheer force of his personality, because he's likable, because he feels like a moderate, can also appeal to just white suburban people. And you put that all together, and I think you can win the presidency with that. I don't give a damn that he couldn't win Texas. That doesn't matter anymore, Bill. We just elected a guy president who's never been elected to anything and never served in a high rank. Beto O'Rourke has way more political experience than Donald Trump did 2 years ago.
I agree that the midterm results do not adjudicate at all the question, do you need a charismatic rock star versus do you need someone plain and dull to match up well against Trump? That's an important question. Because Cindy Axne wins in Iowa 3, that doesn't tell me that the Cindy Axne model works at the presidential stage. I agree with that. And I agree that Beto is a charismatic figure, and the kind of figure that if you're making the charismatic argument, he is the prototype for that. There will be other charismatic choices who have better electoral track records and more experience, more government experience track records. And if you
that's where we disagree.
What's that?
That's where we disagree, and because I think that experience is a negative.
Well, again, this is a separate debate. You're going up. Obviously, experience was not the pivotal factor in 2016, and I think there are plenty of examples. Experience didn't help John McCain over Barack Obama. There are plenty of examples where that is the case, and I think as a general matter, experience is not top of mind.
I'll give you another example. If Barack Obama had hung around the Senate for a decade before running, he wouldn't have been Barack Obama.
I agree with that, and I think you could also argue that Elizabeth Warren's going to have a tougher time if she runs than she would have 4 years ago because she missed her moment.
Chris Christie missed his moment too.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is also possible that after 4 years of an inexperienced president that has descended the world into chaos, an experienced argument might have more salience.
I'd like to live in that world, Bill. I'd like to live in this world that you've constructed where people value things like experience and service. I just don't think we do.
Well, we're talking about what's going to work best in a Democratic primary.
Okay. I'm talking about who can beat Donald Trump, who's best prepared to beat Donald Trump.
The question for the immediate question is, what do Democratic primary voters think you need to beat Donald Trump?
And we may just be talking past each other because I'm operating on the premise of what should Democratic primary voters look for in a nominee?
I think there are really two driving factors in a Democratic primary. There are highly educated white people who dominate national conversation and have debates like this. And there are African-American Southern voters that dominate several Southern primaries and bring you a lot of delegates. Those are the two big constituencies that a candidate has to impress. And the upper middle class white educated voter will go around in circles with these conversations for the next year plus. And I think that, yes, they're going to debate, and I think many will agree with you. We need charisma. We need to, bring the wood to Trump, and experience isn't going to matter. There's going to be an argument for that. And the midterms don't help with that debate. But the argument, the ideological argument, I understand that Arizona is not as red as Texas, but it was still red, still a Trump state, and it's not a case in isolation because you have many, many House districts that function the same way. Sinema running towards the middle in a really blatant, robotic, obvious, transparent way was more successful.
Let's not pretend she didn't know exactly what she was doing.
Was more successful.
She knew exactly.
Beto had flourishes of bipartisanship, but here's a guy who leaned into the NFL protest debate. That's the kind of thing that almost all the winners on the Senate and House level did not do. They got away from the culture war issues, and they focused on health care and special interest tax benefits. That was the winning issue in Trump areas. When you get into a fight, here's a counterexample. Amy McGrath.
What's stopping Beto from doing that, though? Why couldn't Beto?
He could, but it's.
I feel like I could just go in there with and just tweak one little thing. It's like,
does he maintain?
He already feels like a moderate. All he has to do is quit talking about.
Maybe he makes that adjustment. Maybe he does. But look, we had 3 viral video stars of the midterm election. I wrote about this in Real Clear Politics, by the way. Randy Bryce, Amy McGrath, MJ Hagar. Now, MJ Hagar, I think, of the 3, had the toughest race. I don't think she did anything obviously wrong, but just an example of someone who got a lot of hype and people threw a lot of money at her and she couldn't, do the job. And she got close, actually, close to people expected, but several other Texas candidates got close who had no money or didn't get a rock star attention. Bryce is an example where he got $6 million before people figured out, you have a giant arrest record that's going to kill you in a general election. And his opponent in the primary was trying to say, hey, you have an arrest record, you're going to kill a general election, and couldn't get heard because you didn't have $6 million. So an example of maybe you don't give $6 million to a candidate based on a 2-minute video, you wait till someone is properly vetted. Amy McGrath was a better candidate than Randy Bryce, but she did things that allowed Andy Barr to focus on the culture war issues. She's at a Massachusetts fundraiser, not realizing there's a tracker in the room, and she tells the crowd, there's nobody more to the left in Kentucky than me. That becomes the tagline. The audio itself becomes the tagline in almost every Andy Barr ad. In one point in one of the debates, she says, the border wall is stupid. Now, most Democratic candidates didn't say, I love the border wall, but they didn't criticize it in that kind of blunt term that gets used in ads, which it was in Kentucky over and over again. So the cultural issues become dominant, not pre-existing conditions, special interest, corporate tax giveaways. So there is evidence that how Sinema ran was much more effective than how Beto ran, not just Beto's case, but other cases where the cultural issues became more front and center in the race. And maybe you think that's not the end of the story as far as how you go up against Trump in 2020, different playing field, different constituencies. Fine to make that argument, but you certainly can't say based on midterm performance that the Beto model is clear cut the way to go.
All I would say is it's easier for Beto to moderate his positions than it is to make somebody charismatic.
Yes.
It's like going to Mozart and saying, teach me how to play piano like you.
I will say this, though. You look at some early Obama clips. They're not that great.
He always had it.
I think Obama learned. I don't think he was born with charisma. I think he learned.
No, but look at the 2004 speech. You're talking about pre-2004?
I think you look at the 2004 primary. You know, I mean, he was fine, but it wasn't like, wow. I mean, he won because his main opponent, like, you know, self-immolated in some scandal.
No, I believe, look, we can all, look, I've studied as someone who does public speaking and TV. I mean, you could take someone who's like a 7 and make them a 9.
Yeah.
Right? Or you could take a 3 and make them a 6 or a 7. But I don't think you could take a 2 and make them a 10.
Yeah, I mean, I think Obama was a 2.
Remember,
he lost to Bobby Rush for a Congress, you know, in his first run. And even look at some of his early appearances in the presidential primary. They were kind of flat. You know, he had to toughen up and get sharper.
I don't want to go. I'll go back to where we began about what was the line about the confidence of a mediocre white man or something. Confidence is key. Obama. Bill, I mean, all these guys. Bill Clinton had that, you know. I mean, just
Clinton was a natural. Like Clinton was an outright
Clinton
natural.
was a natural, but Obama, I think you're right. Obama had some natural skill, learned it, but in a way, this happens to me when I'm doing public speaking. Like, if you get the audience with you, then you have to really work to mess it up. But you gotta get them, and I think Obama at some point got the confidence, like basically won over the audience, and like then he was locked in.
Yeah, but
confidence really matters.
But I think Obama had like an inner Dukakis in him. So I think once he is president, you look at some like the 2009 town halls that he did. They go on for like 50 minutes. He's these long, meandering, wonky asides, and they love him, so they don't like walk out of the room. But the electricity starts to fade because he's being sort of his inner wonky self, and not. But he could turn it on when he had to turn it on.
Yeah, he can say, "I'm LeBron, baby."
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he had that thing. I remember him and Michelle like fist bumping and stuff. Yeah. I mean, he could lean on that a little bit.
But you're going to have other candidates. You're going to have Biden. You might have Deval Patrick.
And Biden's got a different. Biden's got like the old school cocky.
But it's charisma. You cannot say that.
Yeah, he's got it.
Deval has charisma. Cory Booker has charisma. I think Kamala has charisma. I think Warren has a certain kind of charisma. You know, Bernie has a certain kind of charisma. You know, I think Gillibrand's getting better.
Dan Quayle gaining acceptance in the polls.
I mean, and there are other people who are not going to be charismatic types
out there who are old enough to laugh at that. But.
I mean, Klobuchar is not charismatic. I don't know if Steve Bullock's going to be charismatic. Hickenlooper's got a weird kind of quirky thing going on. Jay Inslee, Governor Washington's not super charismatic. You know, so there's going to be a range of people, and some are going to say, look, you need a rock star. Some are going to say you need pugnacity. Some are going to say it's Warren Harding, return to normalcy, bland, generic, plain.
No. See, I think that Beto can be, and Obama would have done this too. You can be return to normalcy and exciting. You don't have to be boring. I don't think there's any. No, I know that it worked for Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge. I don't think this works in the 21st century. That vote for me, I'm boring. I just don't think.
Well, you obviously wouldn't put it that way. I mean, if it is Klobuchar, I mean, Klobuchar, I think is your if you want to take the prototype of a candidate who won last week, it is Klobuchar, and she won going away in her own race, by the way, in Upper Midwest, what has become what had been a swing state 2 years ago. If you ran as, look, I'm Amy Klobuchar, I'm not going tit for tat with Trump. He can call me whatever nickname he wants. He can berate my gender, call me Sleepy Amy, whatever it is. I'm just going to talk to you about the issues that matter to you and focus on that. You know,
Trump will win 49 states. Okay, 48.
I mean, we don't know. It is we haven't had a kind of matchup like that in ever.
Yeah.
And certainly not one with, Trump's record dominant in the contest. I mean, often a re-election campaign is a referendum on the president, who the opponent is. As long as the person isn't wrapped up in scandal, maybe it doesn't even matter at all who that person is. So if it is, I'm just inoffensive, I'm not getting in anyone's trouble, nothing to hate about me, put all the focus on the other guy, it's possible that wins.
I think, so my theory is, it's all about Trump. He's a wrecking ball. He is he will make this ugly. He will attack people. He will, it's nasty. And I don't think you can like hide from him for a year, I don't think you can like try to like take the high road or I don't think you can duck him, whatever it is. I don't think you can avoid it for a year. I also don't think you can out nasty him. Like I don't think like the Michael Avenatti, we won't even get into his latest potential story. I don't think you can wrestle with a pig. I don't think you can get in the mud with Donald Trump. I think you can outcool him. I think Obama could have handled Trump in a way that Hillary couldn't, by deflecting and remember Russia called. I mean, it turns out to have been a horrible. Horrible point.
I love sarcastic Obama.
Yeah.
I love eye roll Obama. But that wasn't the Obama that won the middle. That wasn't the soaring aspirational Obama. I mean, the hard thing about Trump is that he throws you off your game. He makes it hard for you to play to your own strength, and you're playing on his turf.
Right.
So
I'm thinking what kind of person possibly could beat Trump and hold their own against him?
I mean, I think it's a difficult question. You can't answer it definitively because no one has done it. He's 1-0.
I mean, maybe it's Joe Biden. Maybe it's Oprah. I think Oprah could. I'll put it this way. I don't think there are a lot. I think it's like Biden. I think it's like Beto. I think it's like Oprah. I don't think it's Cory Booker or from New York.
Well,
I want to say Maggie Gyllenhaal. Who am I talking about?
Kirsten Gillibrand.
That would be her.
I do think that Beto maybe will be better a second time round. I think he got taken places that he wasn't necessarily prepared to go, because he is still a relatively young politician. I think the risk of a younger politician is that you haven't been through this before, that you feel you have to answer something they don't really have to answer. You have to be something they don't really want to be in the moment. Cory Booker, we talked this in the past show. Cory Booker is trying to be tough guy when it's not really his wheelhouse. One of the reasons I think you can't count out Biden, I think Biden's got a lot of advantages, that Biden is Biden. Biden knows who he is. He's going to be himself. He's not fazed by anything, and he's going to be the guy that he wants to be, regardless of circumstance.
Right. And by the way, I mean, look, while we're gaming this out, I think Beto has a good shot of winning those suburban, college-educated women, but maybe you go for the Rust Belt. I mean, Donald, in the midterms, Trump did not perform very well in the industrial Midwest. Maybe Joe Biden flips Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan. Maybe that's the way to go.
If you follow a lot of data modelers on Twitter, there's certainly been this kind of, and even some campaign operators, there's a lot of talk. What are the real swing states? What are the states that matter? And you're seeing people say, look, it's really now Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, maybe North Carolina, Florida. North Carolina didn't pick up any seats, but Democrats actually won more House popular vote. Although one of the races was uncontested on the Republican side, this is brought in, but it was pretty close popular vote wise. They have a Democrat governor there. And I'm seeing people say, take Ohio off the map. Scher, that was nice, but it was kind of a soft win, and they got blown out in the governor. They didn't pick up any House seats. Ohio is fundamentally a red state now. Now, Scher might run. First time he expressed interest in it a few days ago. Maybe that changes the equation if he's in it. And I see people talking about Iowa being a red state, which I think is weird, because Democrats won 3 of the 4 House races. They won the majority vote for the House races. They fell short of governor.
King still hangs on,
he hangs on, but it was close. So statewide, Democrats had more House votes than Republicans did. So I don't think you take Iowa.
They got a governor, though. Iowa got a Republican governor.
But it was close. I mean, so that was disappointment for Democrats and not irrelevant.
But I agree. I think it's more blue than red.
And I think the way that Abby Finkenauer actually ran in Iowa is very important. Finkenauer, she went at the tariffs in Iowa 1 cleverly, because she didn't say I'm anti-tariff. She said, tariffs are fine, but not when they hurt farmers. So that's an argument that you can go at the Trump tariff war.
They can hurt other people, but not farmers.
Right. Well, that's right. So if there are more farmers than steelworkers in the states that matter, maybe that's a strong argument. It depends on where the votes fall. So I think there is going to be a strong argument that the Rust Belt really is the biggest swing area, the most states that matter. You give a little bit in the Sun Belt, a little bit in the Southeast, but
so you're saying Biden Beto?
Oh, I'm not saying that.
I know. Okay, Bill, I think you're there.
But I think I do think that
that's a brilliant idea.
Biden, Sherrod, Klobuchar, they're going to have strong arguments that we hail from the places that matter most in this election.
But going back to where you start, sort of your premise is what do Democratic primary voters want? Think they want. The heart wants what the heart wants, right. And I'm not sure the heart wants Joe Biden. We'll see.
Well, I mean, Klobuchar, I think it has the tougher road there because she's not as charismatic. There are definitely Biden fans, as there are Bernie fans, as there are Beto fans, as there are Sherrod fans. Biden doesn't start at 0 in a Democratic primary.
Wow. This is another amazing episode.
All right, I need to pack my kids' lunch because I couldn't do it this morning, so I need to run.
All right, I'm going to have to go yell at our au pair. So
we all have busy things to do.
All right, see you, buddy.
Oh, wait, I want to plug one thing.
Okay.
I'm speaking at Williams College to the AEI Club. The American Enterprise Institute has invited me to speak about the midterms in 2020 at Williams College Tuesday, November 27th at 7:30 p.m. So if you're in the vicinity, check it out.
Wow, and I will be speaking at the ACLU's Oh, no, that's not happening. Check out Bill at the American Conservative. What's it? It's the AEI, American Enterprise Institute.
Yeah, the National Conservative Think Tank. They have college chapters. I'm also speaking at Springfield Technical Community College on the morning of Thursday, November 29th. So back-to-back political analysis for me in a live setting.
Everything's turning up, Bill. All right, we'll see you back here on the DMZ next week, hopefully.
Take care.
Thanks.